Donald Trump's victory, China immediately announces surprising statement. Greetings to all of you watching our program on our YouTube channel. After Donald Trump's overwhelming victory in the 2024 U.S. presidential election, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning emphasized that Beijing will continue to handle its relationship with Washington based on the principles of peace and mutual cooperation. This statement was made by Mao Ning during a regular press briefing. She affirmed that China's policy towards the U.S. remains consistent and that it will continue to approach and manage China-U.S. relations based on mutual respect, peace, and cooperation. She also stated that China respects the choice of the American people, as the U.S. presidential election is an internal matter for the U.S. Regarding the possibility that Trump might raise tariffs on Chinese goods, Mao Ning stressed that Beijing would not respond to hypothetical questions. During his campaign, Trump had claimed that he would impose tariffs of up to 60% on Chinese goods, much higher than the 25% rate during his first term, in an effort to promote U.S. manufacturing. On the subject of congratulating Trump, Mao Ning added that China would address related matters according to protocol once the election results are officially announced. Some experts believe that once Trump returns to the White House, he will almost certainly continue his tough stance on China, particularly focusing on economic and technological competition. This could add further pressure on China's already struggling economy. U.S. Ambassador to Vietnam, Mark Napper, said in a brief exchange with the press during an event about the 2024 elections organized by the U.S. Embassy in Hanoi, that in the future, the U.S.-Vietnam relationship will benefit greatly from bipartisan support. He stated that whether from the Democratic or Republican Party, both parties have supported the Vietnam-U.S. relationship for the past 30 years. These parties and the U.S. government have stood together in supporting a strong, independent, prosperous, and resilient Vietnam. The ambassador confirmed that the strong bond between the two countries will continue and remain robust. Ambassador Napper further stated that the U.S. believes in the strength of the bilateral relationship. He said, "We believe that Vietnam's success is America's success, and vice versa. Therefore, we will gather together with Vietnam to move forward. No matter what happens, we are always with you. And you are always with us." 2025 marks the 30th anniversary of the normalization of relations between Vietnam and the U.S., which will also be the year when the U.S. will have a new president. When asked about this, Ambassador Napper expressed that 2025 will be a time for both countries to reflect on their shared interests. There are many things the two countries are working together on, including building a high-tech economy, a green economy, and semiconductor workforce training. He emphasized that these are goals that Vietnam desires and that the U.S. supports, standing alongside Vietnam. Therefore, he hopes that in the coming year, there will be further progress based on the foundation the two sides have already built. With Donald Trump's victory in the U.S. presidential election, the people of Ukraine are now facing the almost certain change in Washington's policy amid an unfavorable conflict situation for them. Russia has made some quick territorial gains in recent months, and many countries are engaging in diplomatic efforts to find a negotiated solution. During his campaign, Trump criticized the U.S. continuing to provide aid to Ukraine and promised that he could end the conflict within 24 hours. Although he did not clarify how. In his victory speech, the Republican candidate also emphasized, "I will not start a conflict. I will stop conflicts." However, when Trump declared victory, the conflict in Ukraine was still raging fiercely. Air raid sirens were sounding in Kyiv, and his commitment to ending the conflict within one day raised concerns that the new U.S. leader might push for a peace solution, regardless of unfavorable terms for Ukraine. Another risk facing Ukraine's military is that Russia is reportedly involving third-party forces in its military efforts in the Odessa region. Moreover, Ukraine's unstable military situation clouds the prospects for a negotiated solution. Delicate multilateral negotiations have made some progress in recent months. But diplomats involved in the talks have stated that it is still unclear how Trump's mediating role will align with these efforts. Patrick Turner, NATO's head of office in Ukraine, recently visited Kyiv and met with Ukraine's defense minister, Rustem Umerov. The two discussed the progress made on agreements reached during the NATO-Ukraine summit in Washington, particularly on air defense provisions and the implementation of JTEC and Anitu projects. NATO's representative in Kyiv acknowledged significant progress in Ukraine's military reforms. With NATO opening an office in Kyiv, Ukraine is now closer to NATO. A decision to open the office was made following the NATO-Ukraine summit at the highest level in the framework of this military summit in Washington. Patrick Turner, who previously served as an assistant to former NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg on operations, defense policy, and policy planning, will coordinate cooperation between NATO and the Ukrainian government. He will also manage NATO's efforts to provide the alliance with assessments and recommendations on the situation in Ukraine. Earlier, at the NATO-Ukraine summit in Washington, the military alliance agreed to allocate €40 billion to Ukraine in 2025. Additionally, Ukraine's next financial obligations will be discussed at the upcoming summit in the Netherlands in June 2025. Additionally, NATO will consult on the development and deployment of Ukraine's air defense and missile defense systems. In a related development, Russian Security Council Deputy Chairman Dmitry Medvedev warned that Ukraine's potential NATO membership could lead to World War III. Russia continues to view NATO's expansion toward its borders as an imminent threat. Moscow believes it is not only confronting Ukraine but the entire West. Russia perceives the West, including NATO member states, as effectively having become a combatant due to their continued supply of weapons to Ukraine. NATO committed to bringing Ukraine into the alliance in 2008, disregarding Russia's warnings that Moscow viewed this proposal as a major national security threat. According to Russian officials, the conflict in Ukraine largely erupted because this military bloc attempted to incorporate Kyiv. While former NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg and some NATO members agree that Ukraine will one day join NATO, Kyiv still does not have a specific timeline for membership. The main reason for this stalemate is that the Russia-Ukraine conflict has not yet ended. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has admitted that Ukraine will not be able to join NATO while the conflict with Russia persists. The U.S. command in Europe and Africa has launched NATO's largest artillery exercise, Territory 24, which is being held in the Lapland region of northern Finland. The exercise involves over 5,000 soldiers from the U.S. and 28 allied and partner nations, with more than 130 artillery systems aiming to showcase the alliance's artillery capabilities. The exercise is expected to run until the end of November and take place at several locations beyond Finland, including Germany, Poland, Romania, and Estonia. However, the phase in Finland will likely be closely monitored by Russia, as the Lapland region lies very close to Russia's Murmansk region. The majority of NATO soldiers will be concentrated in Finland during this phase of the exercise, with about 3,600 personnel out of the total 5,000. According to an official press release, the U.S. military is the largest component of the exercise. Finland and Sweden are NATO's newest members, with Finland officially joining at the beginning of 2023. Importantly, Finland shares a 1.340-kilometer border with Russia, and Moscow has warned that this could lead to greater militarization in the Baltic region. However, Russian President Vladimir Putin has responded relatively calmly to this development, dismissing Finland and Sweden's NATO membership as a meaningless move that ultimately harms their national interests. In another significant development, Ukraine's RBC news outlet cited military sources reporting that Ukraine's Defense Intelligence Agency had launched its first-ever drone attack on a Russian naval fleet in Baku, Dagestan. The distance from Ukraine's border to the target was about 1.500 kilometers, a considerable distance for the UAV, which managed to avoid detection by Russian air defense systems. The initial report stated that the attack resulted in the destruction of at least 2 missile boats, the Tatarstan and Dagestan, and damages to smaller vessels from Project 21631. Russia has not yet commented on these reports. According to sources, the attack location was a base of the Caspian Fleet of the Russian Navy, which also serves as the gathering point for coastal defense and marine infantry forces. Caspian Navy vessels have been actively involved in missile strikes on Ukraine since the early days of the conflict, with the most recent in July 2024. However, of the 5 ships capable of carrying caliber missiles, only 3 escort vessels had been operating in the Caspian Sea before 2012, with the other ships transferred from the Black Sea in early 2024.